Hello, Katlejo. How are you, sir?
Hey Ron, how you doing, bud? Let me put my camera on as well. How are you?
Well, and you, are you good?
I'm good, and I'm not in a car dealership this time. How's that?
I love that. I love that. I love that. That AI screen of yours. Fantastic.
Thank you.
All right, we're gonna start. Let everybody in. Oh, everyone's here already. Let me see who's with us so I can just greet and send greetings and salutations. Attendees. Let's see who's in with us today. Aisha
No.
Sali is with us. Becky's note taker. So hello, Becky's note taker. Good to have you. Uh, Denisha is with us. We've got Jess. Hey, Jess. Lester, Marcel, Nkulunga, Ntombentle, Pumelela is with us. Dr. Badol and Mbekile is with us as well. So, 12:01, let's rock and roll. I say to everybody, welcome, good day. Thank you for joining us today. This is your session. So, within the session today, please note that any questions that you have, please put your hands up or type it in the chat. We've also got Jacinta there to help us out with that. But I'm excited about the topic today because it's something that I feel that as we talk to the one and the only Katlejo, he's going to share some amazing insight in the way that he takes topics to make it absolutely resonant. So the reality is that here in this webinar right now, we have someone here, and if the shoe fits, wear it, who has not stopped since 6 a.m. They've answered all 1,200 messages before their first cup of coffee as Katlejo takes a sip of his or his tea. They've been in back-to-back meetings since 9. And if you ask them how they are, they'll just say, I'm good. I'm just busy. Now, that word busy is doing a lot of work in South Africa right now, especially in corporate South Africa, in our government departments, in SMMEs. And it's the answer that we give when the honest answer is too complicated. It's the armor that we have, the credential, the proof that, hey, I'm still in the game. But here's what I've learned in 2 decades of working with high performing and high sustaining performance organizations, right? Is that busy can never become a status. It's a symptom. And the most dangerous version of that symptom is when it wears the face of resilience.
Mhm.
And that's part of our discussion today, right? Because resilience, I feel, has become a word that we've weaponized. We've turned it into a badge, a mark of seniority. I can handle this. Mina, I don't break. I'm built different. And it doesn't matter how big your mkaba is. Yes, and in South Africa, where economic pressure is real, where unemployment is real, where privilege of just having a job is real, that pressure to perform, to hold it together, to never show cracks runs even deeper. And today's conversation isn't about whether you're resilient, right? Today's conversation is about what cost is there that we're paying. And there's something that I've never thought of. And, in the last couple of months, really reflected on that. So before I bring our expert guest in, I just want to share with you how today works. This is not a lecture, folks. This is a conversation. And you're in it. And there'll be live polls. There'll be moments where I ask you to reflect and type into the chat. And it's up to you whether you choose to engage and immerse into that conversation. And I really hope that you take notes of action, notes of awareness, notes of things that you could potentially action as you end the discussion today on what you could utilize to change the trajectory of how you are showing up and performing and feeling. So the person that I want in the room as Ronald, and I want to show you my space. You see Katlejo's space, no?
My virtual
You
space.
guys see that?
Love it. Love that for you, Ron. Tough, tough, tough place to work.
So I will let everybody in the chat try to guess where I'm at having this conversation today. I will let you try to guess in the chat. Let me show you one more time.
Is it one place? No, it's not.
Try to in the chat, in the chat, Katlejo, in the chat.
Okay, sorry.
um, so really, when I have these hard conversations, I want to have a person in the room that has lived inside these systems and not just studied them. And Katlego Mabusela brings something rare to this work. He understands organizational culture, not as a policy document, but as a lived experience. He sits with executives who have everything on paper and nothing in the tank. He's worked with teams who are technically high functioning, but quietly falling apart. Katlego Mabusela is a seasoned entrepreneur, business coach, and an emotional intelligence specialist with 2 decades of entrepreneurship experience. And Mina, more than 15, maybe 16 now years as an enterprise development facilitator. And over his career, he's worked with well over 1,000 business owners, equipping them with emotional intelligence traits that they need to succeed within their businesses and in their lives, to make better decisions and to build thriving teams. And ladies and gentlemen, and whichever other pronoun you'd like to be referred to as, in 2025, Katlego was nominated for the Forbes South Africa 40 Under 40 Awards in the Social Enterprise category. Yay! And the song in my head plays, "'Cause all I do is win, 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 no matter what. Got money and impact on my mind, no matter what. And every time he steps up in the building, everybody has go up." Now keep them there and work your shoulders. All right. So, Katlego, thank you for joining us and welcome.
Always a pleasure, Ron. Always such a pleasure. And like I said, at least today I'm not sitting in. I think the last time we spoke, I was getting the car fixed somewhere.
Yeah. No, you were definitely. So, folks, I want to actually check in on the following, right? And as we work with our tech, it's a cricket ground. Ooh, Marcel Armstrong. Ronald is in a cricket ground. Maybe Centurion, not been there for a while. Oh, you are close, but it is not that one. It is the other one. So, folks, I want to put a poll up. So I'm sitting here at the Wonder Stadium at the edge. I've got a couple of meetings here. And really what I realized is at times when you can, to find a space and a moment, even in your day, wherever it may be, with a walk, a coffee, a tea, a colleague, a laugh. It just brings in the opportunity of refresh, sidebar. But here's a question I'd like us to answer. And as I look at this poll, I want to ask you the following question. Right now, which word best describes your state? Which word best describes your state? Right? And when we look at this thing, we are speaking here about resilience. We are speaking here about running on resilience. That's the theme, and that's why you're here today. So right now, sitting or standing, wherever you may be, which word describes your state? And Katlego, can you see the results?
I can't see the results yet.
All right, let me share them with you quickly, right? Oh, it's coming in fast and furiously, just like a fast bowler would at the Wanderers cricket pitch.
Did you see what you did there?
I see what you did. All right, I'm ending it in 5 seconds. All right, let's end the poll. So, Katlego, of the participants here, 25% say they feel energized. 17% say they feel stretched. 42% say they're running on fumes. And 17% say they've stopped noticing. So it's a reality, right? So, Katlego, I mean, before we even continue, I think something that we need to really chat about and to start off, without pleasantries, but really get into somewhere uncomfortable, because I think that's where the opportunity lies for us to grow, right? Because if we don't name it and define it, how can we have a useful conversation about it? So in your experience, when you look at organizations, government departments, big and or small organizations, right? And we look at high-performing professionals in those organizations, what does holding it together actually look like? And where does performance end and the mask begin?
Thanks, Ron. I think, it's such a jarring conversation for myself as well. Typically, just to give you an idea, before I actually answer your actual question, when we have sort of full days, I'm just thinking about my day today, and knowing that you and I were going to have this conversation, and that it was going to be, on a webinar, and it was going to be shared with the public, there was, whether intentionally or subconsciously, an attempt on my part to do exactly what we're about to talk about, which is to project the mask of holding it together. When you put the poll up and I tried to vote, and I was like, oh, you can't vote as a panelist, I would have probably contributed to the 47%. We're just about to go into April, and I'm already running on fumes. I am incredibly exhausted. I texted my wife this morning and I said, I know that this is a short week, but it still feels so terribly long. I'm burnt out. And I literally seconds before you asked the question was pondering, do I tell the truth or do I hold that mask up? And I think maybe one of the things we need to start by acknowledging is that, like you rightfully said, we have gotten to a place where resilience has almost been weaponized. And it wasn't an intentional exercise. It was all well-meaning because, we must all be strong, we must push through, we must hit those numbers. Good leadership is about being strong. You carry the team on your shoulders. That's what we say, right? And this is across all organizations. To the point where once you start to admit the vulnerability, once you start to admit that you might be struggling, once you start to admit that burnout is happening in real time in your work, and it looks like you're not being engaged in conversations with the people that matter most, really, because as much as we love our organizations and we love adding value, and some of us are privileged enough to be operating in alignment, and so be doing sort of purposeful work, at least what we feel is purposeful. We really need that energy when we get home, when we're with our kids. You pick them up from soccer or from cricket, and you're wanting to find out what's going on in their lives, but you just don't have anything left in your tank anymore. You get home and you're not present with the person that you have committed to sharing a life with, or you're irritable, or you are all these other things. And we haven't even spoken about you. We haven't spoken about the fact that you can't remember what you've eaten for the last 2 weeks because you eat almost as a mechanical exercise. Everything is on automation, but it almost seems as if you're not living your life, but your life is kind of running or living you. And so that's how it looks. It doesn't look, it's not measured KPIs. It's not something that shows up on, reports, but it shows up in our homes, in our day-to-day lives, in our quiet moments, if you even have those quiet moments. By the time we're seeing it on reports, it's too late. By the time we're seeing that kind of data come out, it's too late. But unfortunately, a lot of the environments and organizations that most of us work in or work through are not safe enough for us to say, it's not great right now. I need some help. I need to lean on someone. I need to pull back a little bit. I need to rest a little bit because you're risking the professional, obviously, I guess it'll be the facade in this instance. You're risking so much once you start to admit those things. So I know I might not have answered the question, but I thought it was important that I also come honestly. I come to this conversation from an authentic place and not put up the very thing that we're trying to work out of the systems.
I can echo your sentiments because I'm part of that 47%. And in a day, I sometimes feel like I'm part of the 17% where I'm numb.
Yeah.
And if I'm honest, I think I shift more to the numb than running on fumes. Because in being a wellness and human capacity expert, I still need to apply what we teach, what we share. And the number one thing is awareness, and part of awareness is vulnerability and honesty. But also, Katlego, is that as we sit here today, I mean, we use this word resilience, and I said in my introduction, we use it so often in so many different ways, and it's almost become white noise. Oh, guys, our team is stressed. We must do a resilience program. Oh, my goodness, let's do this. Where's the resilience? Where's this? Where's the resilience? And how would you help us today as we, really go down this rabbit hole? How would you, with where we are in March 2026, look and define what is resilience that we are going to be speaking to? And remember, folks, and I'm sure Katlego shares my sentiment, we are not here to be liked. We are here to challenge you. And Katlego, I'm speaking on your behalf here, bruh, but I think that's where we are in it as we speak, the truth that's always validated. So how would you define it? And also, folks, would you agree with how Katlego defines, no pressure, Katlego, would you agree with how he defines it? And what would you like to remove or add to his definition? Put it in the chat. Katlego, over to you.
So I'll start by saying this, that resilience should not be what keeps people going at all costs. I think let's take that into consideration. And I think part of what's made it toxic, and I threw that word out and I'm sure I'm triggering somebody somewhere, right? But is this idea that when we are living resiliently, whether it's in the corporate space or in our personal lives or wherever it might be, we must keep going at all costs. That's not healthy resilience. In fact, a part of me is tempted to say, maybe we should be framing this conversation of resilience against regulation. So the two R's, right? What is a regulated person versus a resilient person? And ultimately, what's a regulated team, right? A well-regulated, well-balanced team versus one that's being resilient, right? When you are being resilient, it is the byproduct of, it is in fact a signal, a symptom of something in the system has failed. And it is putting pressure either internally or externally, but there is pressure that is being applied. So therefore, we need to go and find the root cause. In an ideal world, and I understand that we're not in an ideal world, we shouldn't have to be resilient, if that makes sense. Yes, obviously resilience builds a lot of character. It is where we test ourselves, etc., etc. So that there's almost like a high-performing component to where the resilience conversation should be. And that part of the conversation has been what has been taken and to some degree manipulated and leveraged against the people in most organizations. And as a result, we are forced to then perform at all costs. Resilience should not be us getting things done, staying in the arena at all costs. What it should be, right, is a signal to the team, to the organization, even to the individual, that something's not okay. If I'm finding that I'm existing in an environment where more often than not we're having to demonstrate resilience or live in a resilient, operate in a resilient culture, something is not okay. And let's start to look around at what might be forcing us into this survival, resilience sort of energy and space.
Oh, I love it. Folks, what do you think? Please share your insights, share your comments.
I'm okay with that.
Oh, okay. He is. Yeah, no, we got thick skin, right? We got thick skin. So please use the chat. Is there anything you'd like to add to that definition? Does it land with you? Remember, this is not about right or wrong, good or bad. This is a judgment-free space, but it's a space where we have these honest conversations. So please put that in there. So Katlego, you spoke here about the signal, right? So if we're looking at the signal that we need to be aware of, it is quite interesting because when we find this, hey, check, there's the signal.
Love it.
He's coming back. Wait. Ah! There's a signal, all right? Okay, go away. Katlego, the one thing I've also heard a lot and that I've thought a lot about, and okay, I haven't heard a lot about it. I've thought about it, and I'll be honest with that. And something I've been sitting with is something called functional depletion. The person who's technically doing the job, meeting the metric, showing up to every meeting, but whose internal resource is at zero, nada.
Sure.
How common is that in your experience? And is it getting more common, or have we just gotten better at seeing it and doing nothing about it?
I think both are true. So how common is it? It's definitely common. We see it across organizations. It's unfortunately the byproduct of exactly what has brought us here, right? Which is this idea that most organizations aren't safe enough for you to actually speak up and say, I'm not doing okay. The environments that you've curated aren't where, people come and can actually safely sort of raise the flag and say, there are things that are going wrong. Equally so, we see it more. What we're seeing in the data is that there are more and more of these conversations that are happening around this depletion, functional depletion, as we call it. And unfortunately, whilst talking about it is great and is always a good starting sort of point, we're not offering any solutions. What we're finding more and more, and especially as we went into lockdown and came out of lockdown and then debated the stay at home or work from home, the virtual work, etc., that entire debate, that's caked on an even deeper, thicker, more hard set layer on the conversation, because teams, individuals, people are finding that there's more expectation. Sometimes it's even virtual expectation. It's not true. It's almost a perceived expectation that the system has of them. And again, I won't say individuals, I won't say managers, I won't say leaders in the organization. It is the systems that are being curated and created. I raise that point because it's very important to understand that what this challenge that we have is not subjective. It is very much something that exists across the systems that we've so over decades and decades and perhaps millennia have created that are about extracting value, right? Without necessarily being sensitive to the resource that we so beautifully call the human resource in our documentation and so forth, which is the person, a person who lives and breathes, at the end of the day, needs to pour back in. And we are running them down to the bone. So to answer your question in a short way, one, it is prevalent across the board, whether it's public or private sector, even in the founder ecosystem, which I've been spending quite a lot of time in as well. So the startup space, you're seeing a lot of that as well. And two, we are aware of it, but we are not doing anything. If anything, we have glorified it. We have made it a badge of honor, which in fact then feeds back into this false narrative about this toxic type of resilience. And I do want us to make that distinction that there is toxic resilience and there is a healthier version of what that sustainable resilience could possibly look like.
Mm-hmm. It lands. It does land. And the one thing I want to say to you is that often when we look at things like toxic resilience, and I'd love us just to unpack that a little bit, right? Because many people associate it with good and bad stress, distress, and eustress, and but we don't look at it in the context of toxic resilience versus resilience that is needed, in that sense. And often we need oxygen masks because when we're in workplaces and that is absolutely requiring us to immerse into toxic resilience over and over again, we often feel like we need an oxygen mask. So Katlego, how would you just help us understand this difference between toxic resilience and the non-toxic resilience?
Well, I think the toxic resilience we've actually kind of spoken to, which is this idea of resilience at all costs, survival at all costs, delivery at all costs, right? The byproduct of that is burnout, it's depression, it is teams that fragment, it is I could literally run a whole list of things that are the byproduct of that, right? And maybe where we would get more value is speaking to what sustainable resilience looks like. And essentially, that comes down to about three things. Number one is awareness. And we'll unpack what that looks like. Number two is permission. And number three is rituals, all right?
Number three is? So it's awareness?
Yeah.
Number two is?
Permission and rituals. Okay. I should probably precede it by saying that, part of my work involves standing on stages and we're typically called motivational speakers. And I thank the Lord, have kind of moved away from that positioning. And it's largely because it doesn't resonate with me, and I think we've seen a sort of a big departure from that framing of the work we do, because you really cannot motivate people into sustainable performance. I could inspire you. I could do all kinds of other things to get you excited, that little spark. But for consistency, right, we need something beyond just motivation. It has to be intentional. It has to be systemic. It has to be designed, right? And so, having said that, let's go back to the 3 points that I've raised. Awareness. One of the questions that we need to be asking ourselves is, can people recognize when strain is building? And maybe let's bring it onto a personal level. Can you recognize when the pot is starting to boil? It's not whistling quite yet. It's not whistling quite yet, but something is happening on an individual level. Now, on another organizational level or team level, what systems do you have in place to check that? You are very much able to check top line, bottom line, right? We're able to check all of those other metrics that exist from a KPI perspective, from a business performance perspective. But what metric do you have in place or system do you have in place to measure the performance and wellness? Wellness, not even the performance, the wellness of your team. A lot of organizations can't answer that affirmatively. They don't know, they don't have them. And in fact, your team knows. Some of them, they have them. The team has no idea that they exist. These resources are possibly available, but they have no idea, right? And I wish we could get some responses from that question
Yeah.
in the text. How many of us are aware of the tools that are available for us in the organizations we work in? If we're leaders in organizations or owners of systems, right? What systems do we have available for us to be able to pick up the emotional state of our team members? These people who have children, who have loved ones, who have extended families whose pressures they carry on their shoulders, and they've got all the professional pressure that they carry in their world. So the first level is really around awareness.
I love that.
second,
And I want to hold on to that first point, because we have quite a few wellness practitioners here. Those are champion wellness programs in workplaces. I know that we've got Dr. Sanusha Badul in the chat as well, and in the call. And she's got a PhD in this stuff. They've spoken at international conferences and champions it for Office of the Premier and KZN. So you might get the answer, well, there's a wellness program, because that's what I hear from many leaders. I hear that. When I mention this, there's a wellness program. Call the call center. Log onto the website. Let's do a session. But you said something that absolutely resonates with my soul. What tools or systems do you have that can immediately tell you, or that metric, rather than in 30 days or 60 days when you get a report? So yeah, I just want to share that with you before I forget it. I got the brains of a Ferrari and the brakes of a bicycle. So I had to share that with you.
Similar that way. So that'll be the first thing. I think the second thing then would be something that, again, we've already touched on, which kind of speaks to the toxic part of it. But in this instance, in sustainable resilience is permission. Do I feel safe? Is the environment safe enough for me to say that I'm reaching their limits, or I've reached a limit? Is the culture safe enough? And most organizations will answer affirmatively and say, yes, again, we invest a lot in making sure, but let's sense check that. What is the reality of your people? What are they really saying? So one of sort of my big sectors that I work in is in the banking environment. High pressure, highly regulated. I think a lot of us might be familiar with kind of that space, right? And because of these organizations having been around for as long as they've been, so a lot of them have obviously got a lot of what looks like the right things in place. So we've got these, programs that have been implemented many years over, recouped, refined, etc., etc. But when you go down to the ground, when you engage on a face-to-face level with team members, in fact, maybe let's put that title away. When you engage with the people in the business, right, you then realize that whilst those tools might be there, the environment is not safe enough. The team does not feel safe enough to, one, engage with them, does not trust that in using them, anything will change. In fact, if anything, they feel an internal level of risk because they worry that if they go to those places, they're signaling to the ecosystem that they are weak, that they are maybe not capacitated, they cannot be trusted. Maybe they're not the ones who can carry the pressure. Maybe they're not the ones who can lead the team. And so there is a trust component that's being broken there. That then needs to be addressed as well. And that speaks to culture and many other things. So the second part, like I said, is permission. Is it safe enough for me to feel what I feel? I'm a feelings guy. Typically, I'll be wearing a t-shirt saying I'm emotional. And then people call me Tevin Campbell, and I say this is not the time or place. But not all of us feel safe enough in the environments that we occupy to be able to say that, look, again, I'm struggling, right? Once we then have that in place, and we kind of have looked at the permissions conversation, on a very practical level, we need to build the third component, which is rituals. what have we designed on a structural level that is repeatable, possibly repeatable at scale, depending on the nature of the organization, that are healthy practices that allow for our teams, again, scratch teams, put our peoples, our groupings of peoples. It's very important that we keep remembering that as much as we call each other team members and all, we are ultimately individuals having a very human, very visceral experience, right? And so what do we have in place that allows for us to regulate on a personal level, to regulate on an organizational level, and just check firstly where the pressure levels are and allow for us to release some of that pressure in the system. And typically, what would you have? You have a whole lot of offsites, and we all know how those go, right? There'll be a lot of conferences, there's webinars. I mean, we live in a world where a lot of the content now sits on digital platforms. So the conversations will be that team members have access to these things, et cetera, et cetera. But again, are we deploying the right resources? Are we deploying the right rituals? Are we building the right rituals into our teams to allow for Katlego to say, I'm not feeling okay, so there's the awareness. I feel safe enough to say things are not fun. But more importantly, there's a go-to that builds internal regulation for teams, but also helps my own, regulation. It's not an anomaly. It is a normalized resource tool ritual in the organization. And unfortunately, 9 out of 10 times you'll find that those things don't exist.
You speak true and resonate. So folks, just to recap that, you can take a screenshot of this. Sustainable resilience, as Katlego spoke, 2 or 3 things: awareness, permission, and rituals. Please check out this recording later on to really unpack how Katlego unpack this even further. Katlego, the one thing I've also noticed is, when I see there's a couple of questions coming in, and I want to save us some time to get to those questions because that's more important for me, is, in working in multiple sectors, in corporates, big corporates, banking sector as well, insurance sector, in the government sector, in SMME sectors, especially when it comes to the government sector and the public sector and the private sector and big organizations, there's a lot of data. There's a lot of things being done. You and I know culture survey, people survey, engagement survey. You and I know there's an L&D support system. There's a wellness program. There's a new culture drive. I mean, some leaders are now called employee experience directors. There's so many of these things available, but the data points are also your health risk data, your absenteeism data. So there's a lot of data points, but all these data points sit in separate silos, and it's like an ESG report. The time it comes for reporting, hey, you must piecemeal together very quickly these different Excels and documents. And it also sits sometimes with different providers. Yeah. You spoke to these 3 things, and the 3 things I want to remind everyone again, and to really check within yourself, within your team, within your organization. We want to build sustainable resilience. We need awareness, we need permission, and we need rituals. And within that awareness, it sits within the individual and how do they experience and feel, but also it sits in what is the collective data telling you. And I think there's a gap here, Katlego. I think the gap here is courageous leadership. To take the information, to acknowledge it, to own the fact that maybe things are working, things are not working, the current rituals may need some tweaking, and trust in your team. What is your coaching and your experience in working with leaders within these organizations where you can see the data is saying one thing, but they're not actioning that data? What have you seen, and what would your insight be to those leaders and or managers?
Courage, have courage. And I know it's not an insight in that sense. But you're very right, man. A lot of it has to do with the fact that those very environments themselves. So maybe let me do this, right? Because we're speaking on an individual level. I want us to speak on a structural level. Granted, the structures are created by leaders, they're created by people. Oftentimes, the challenge we have is that the environments themselves are not safe for all involved. And as I've ascended in my professional career through, the different layers of the organization, I operate in an environment that has normalized a toxic type of resilience. And so a part of it is that I am just playing out the narrative that has been, right? I might not even have the awareness that what we're doing is not really healthy. right? Furthermore, if I become the champion of the Drake champion, I had a colleague of mine who was playing Drake the one time as he went into one of these sessions. And someone said, "Whew, I wouldn't want to be in your guy's office." And she politely turned back and said, "Why is that? Like, if this is the music you play coming into meetings, I can only imagine that everybody feels in your office." And we kind of laughed it off. But I mentioned that simply to say that, we might not even be safe as leaders, because the same leader that sits in that position of leadership was at some point in a different position. And so what has been normalized through ritual, what has been normalized through systems, what has been normalized over the years is what they've now internalized as well. And so I would say this: give yourself grace, because I think most of us want to do the right thing. We want to create environments where people want to come to. We want to create environments that we would have loved to have had when we were still on our journey to positions of leadership, right? So give yourself grace, right? But look at it at a structural level, at an organizational level, and say, what can we put in place at that level to start to deal with some of these systemic issues?
No, I really enjoy that, and that leads me perfectly into our next poll question, right? And the next poll question is about, like you said, about awareness, is really segueing off that. And the question is, when you notice a signal, tension, fatigue, irritability, disconnection, what do you most often do with it? Do you push through and assume it'll pass? Check out the poll in the chat, folks. Do you make a mental note and do nothing? Do you mention it to someone? Or do you actually stop and address it? Because this, I think, Katlego speaks brilliantly into touching on those three components of the sustainable resilience, right? Because stopping and addressing it kind of speaks to rituals. There's an awareness component on here. And of course, that permission component as well that we then look at. So as we look at the results, sure. I'm going to give it another 10 seconds. And the question again, to remind you, Katlego, you and I discussed this, because I want to get to some of the questions that have been posted here, is when you notice a signal, tension, fatigue, or irritability or disconnection, what do you most often do with it? And, Katlego, 64% push through and I assume it will pass.
Pass fate.
17% make a mental note, do nothing. 8% and 8% mention it to someone and actually stop and address it. Wabon, Katlego, insight, feedback, Chief.
The numbers don't lie. The numbers don't lie. That is not an anomaly. What we're seeing there is the truth. And I love that. Let me commend everybody who's on the call. I appreciate that we're being so honest, because that is the reality. More often than not, we will push through and assume somebody else or some part of the system will catch it, right? Or just out of being disempowered as well and saying, okay, I see it, but I just don't know what to do with it. Or an even deeper one would be the fact that, again, if this is our lived reality in this environment, we're used to this. We've normalized this as behavior. In fact, I'd even add one more question and say, what would you say is one behavior that you've normalized in yourself at work that you know is not sustainable? What is one behavior that we have normalized for ourselves in work that we know for sure is not sustainable, but we keep doing it over and over again? Sometimes you're not even thinking about it.
Powerful. They have normalized in work that we know is not sustainable.
That we know is not sustainable.
Okay, folks, do not judge my spelling, but do not judge it. Don't be judgerig.
I feel like you judge your spelling.
I do. But my Grammarly doesn't work here. But what is the one behavior that we have normalized in work that we know is not sustainable? Oh, I think it is something to sit with.
Let me ask you, Ron, what would you say that?
No, I'm reflecting on that.
Yeah.
And the one thing about me is that you'll get transparency and honesty. I see here Anne is mentioning false positivity and optimism. It will get better. Mine is going into myself. So into my own head and ignoring everything else. So it's that just let me pull inward, nothing else matters. And it's that I label it as a BS of hyperfocus, but it's actually as insecurity. It's actually as not trusting. It's actually as if I fail, it's okay, but no one else will know.
Oh,
Or if I succeed, it's okay. No one else will know. The team will just
yeah.
benefit. Yeah. I
So I'm
little
reflecting myself. I think there is a component of it where toxic positivity.
yeah.
I've used a lot in this session today. I think I was I think on my journey I have modeled what I thought were healthy ideas of performance, like most of us. I don't, and I didn't have insight into when those individuals were struggling. I don't know when they were, you know. And if I was to be super honest with myself, I always say I feel like I was raised by books because a large part of just my personal developmental journey beyond my professional career has to do with a lot of content consumed at a distance, and so obviously that's very curated, and you're seeing a very sort of particular persona or facade of that particular leader's journey and story. And so when I'm facing my moments of pressure, when the team is struggling, when things feel heavy, I feel the need to go back into that space as opposed to honestly saying, level number one, we're aware of this challenge, we're aware of what's happening in KG. Two, it's a safe space for you to share that things are not going well. And three, what can we collectively come up with that is practical, that is scalable, that is repeatable, to put in place so that if myself or anybody else in the team ever finds themselves struggling with something similar, it might prevent it, number one, but it might also help sort of bring us out of those environments. But let's keep a positive face, guys. Let's go. We'll get through that. We'll make time. We'll find time. It's, you know, so there is a part of me that has probably, I would say done that a lot.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that, because in allowing me to do the same, folks, what we're sharing here is we're being vulnerable. We're sharing parts of ourselves that the world might not see, but we're sharing it with you to mirror. Hey, unfortunately not, Katlego. Yes, it is there. But Katlego, let us jump into the questions that got posed. And I love this because it really does show that what is landing with our audience. So Marcel Armstrong, yes, I'm at a cricket grounds. And you asked or mentioned here, I've always understood resilience to be something we apply in difficult conditions and the ability to recover from those conditions quickly or easily. However, our environments seem difficult for longer periods or are pressured and hard all the time. So we need to be resilient all the time. No recovery time. How to cope with this? And that's the question.
How to cope with this? You shouldn't have to cope, Marcel. I think it's Marcel, right?
Marcel, yes.
Yeah, Marcel, the reality is you shouldn't have to cope. We shouldn't have to be under pressure for extended amounts of time. That in itself is the unsustainableness of it, or unsustainable nature of this. However, if I was to sort of advise on a personal level, if you take those three sort of points that I mentioned, right, around awareness, around safe spaces, and then number three being rituals, is what can you do for yourself? Because nobody's coming to save us, as they say, right? On a personal level, I just encourage that awareness. What does that look like? If we might not have the time, might not have the luxury all the time, but we might just have that gap in between driving to go pick the kids up, or maybe just after dropping them off on the way to the office. Maybe put the radio off. Anela and the team can be okay. They'll be fine. They'll still have time to broadcast the day after still. And just do a bit of an internal audit and ask yourself, how am I feeling? And I say that, and I'm going to qualify it and say, I'm not expecting you to describe, I'm feeling sad, I'm feeling angry, I'm feeling this, right? Because as much as, maybe as a bit of a side note, as much as we have adults, I often say that adults are just children walking around in meat suits, right? we in that journey, we have desensitized ourselves from how it is that we feel as a coping mechanism, as a response, as a trauma response, maybe some would say. So point is, you're in the car and you just do an internal audit. How am I feeling about the week, about the day, about whatever it might be? And look for the physical signs of how you're feeling, right? Start to look internally in the body. Am I feeling run down and tired? I'm not saying I'm feeling sad. I'm saying, am I feeling run down? Do I feel energized? Do I feel unsettled? So that's the kind of language that starts to give us an indication of what it might be. So I don't want to go to the emotion. I want to stay in the physical feeling. What is manifesting in the biochemistry of my body? That's a good place to start for awareness. You don't have to do this every day, but make sure that maybe once a week you're checking in with yourself. Then we start to say, why might that be coming up? Why am I experiencing this? And you'll go through a plethora of things that might be happening, right? And try and sort of search through what might be the biggest contributor to this feeling that's happening. Has this been going on for a long time? Is this something that's new? Is this something that's recent? Is this something that is recurring? So you just kind of do a little internal audit yourself, right? Number two, around creating safe spaces. We need to be intentional about creating those safe spaces for ourselves. Where do you have permission to share that vulnerability? Where do you have permission? And maybe let me caution, that permission might not be in the work environment. It might be outside of it. It might be with your spouse. It might be maybe with a therapist or whoever, but we have to intentionally create those spaces where we have permission to say everything is not okay. It might be with your mates. Maybe you haven't seen the gents in a while, and that speaks to ritual, right? So it might be part of your not coping ritual, but regulation ritual might be that periodically you meet up with a particular group of friends, and through just breaking bread, laughing, grabbing a drink, you find that you process a lot of stuff, right? Or maybe you resettle emotionally, or you have very deep, meaningful conversations. It might be with your romantic partner, whatever it might be, but then make sure that you have that ritual in place. And if you're not honoring it, remember that it has a recurring effect, because this feeling that you're feeling is more often than not signaling that that part might be broken. You are not taking care of you. Nobody's coming to save us. As much as a lot of organizations are well-meaning, more often than not, it'll be a miss. So that's what I would recommend, just as a simple framework, checking in once a week. What's going on internally? What might be causing it? Right? Then saying, okay, have I created a safe space where I can, go and share this? And number three, do I have rituals in place that allow for me to regulate? Whether it is social rituals, whether it's personal rituals, maybe you enjoy sort of cycling, you might enjoy walking, whatever it might be. We all know the impact of exercise on our biochemistry. So that's just a quick little sort of, I hope it helps, but I think it'll be one of those.
Insight. And I mean, we want to continue these conversations further on your platforms, right? So please reach out and let's continue it. Dr. Sanusha Badul asks, workplaces have normalized resilience culture. Most workplaces have not healed post-COVID. People are running on empty. And over the past years, we've been capacitated with volumes of information. Ownership of our state is required for us to drop the mask we are wearing and take accountability, because soon we'll not even have the fumes to run on. The silence of the looming changes will be compounding on one's level of resilience. So great comment, but then she does come with a question. That was powerful. Thank you, Dr. Badul. And then she says, here's a question. What advice can you provide when employees do not feel safe in the workplace, given the current trend where employees who speak out are being targeted or taken out?
That's a difficult one, which is, I guess, why you've asked the question. Platforms like this contribute to the overall systemic change, because we have to start having the conversations, normalizing the conversations, and ultimately challenging leadership to act, right? It isn't a moment. I think we need to acknowledge that. It's not something that happens overnight. And like with most, not to use that hyperbole here, but like with most struggles, those that are in the struggle often are not the beneficiaries of, that revolution. It is going to be in the micro wins. It is going to be in us doing our own internal regulation and sort of taking care of ourselves. It is going to be in us having the courage in those little moments to say, I'll be the one who says, I'm not okay first. I'm not completely okay. I'll be the one who says, I need to pull back a little bit. I need to reprioritize a little bit. And so when 1 becomes 2 and 2 become 20 and 20 become 200, we start to see a cultural change, a systemic change. It's not going to be something that happens overnight. I think it starts with the individual. But I know that in saying that,
Yeah.
there's a courage that is required. It isn't an easy thing. There's risk that comes with it. And whilst consultants like myself or external parties can speak to those risks without having to carry those risks, it's going to take people who are in the systems to have the courage to make those micro changes and start to normalize a different way of being, a different way of performing, and a different way of measuring performance at that level as well.
Yeah.
What is our biggest, I mean, if you're a team leader on the call, or a business owner, a system owner in that sense, what is the biggest metric that you use to measure whether your business is healthy or not? Is it the rands and cents? Is it the number of clients we have retained? Is it what metric are you using? Or is it the happiness levels of your team members? Is it something more human? Because whilst we are building great systems, we're building these systems that human beings operate in, and how are their beings in your business? And more often than not, businesses that score high on that index will have more sustainability or longer sustainability or a higher probability of sustainability.
That's fantastic. And then next one from Natasha Kamisa, from where I studied Wits. Natasha, thank you for joining us. Yes, Natasha's she's a PhD as well, educator and researcher. And I love what you said here, Natasha. So you and I need to connect after this. I will reach out. Natasha shares, in my experience conducting research on workplace well-being over the years, I have found that despite having the knowledge on how to improve workplace well-being, this knowledge often remains within academia, and it would be helpful to perhaps consider collaboration or consultation around integrating evidence-based practices for improving well-being within workplaces. Natasha, you have spoken the truth to my soul and that mission and purpose that I have. So definitely I'm going to reach out to you after this. Check out your LinkedIn and email, and then we got to really look at how we do that and really bring Katlego into the convo as well for that. Marcel says, people try to address, but nothing changes. Eventually just push through or ignore. And thank you, Marcel, for your honesty here, because you say, I have normalized working longer hours for no pay. Katlego, that speaks true to awareness on self and what's happening, but the reality that nothing changes. So if nothing changes, what do I do when it comes to this resilience component?
When the system fails you, in any context like this, you find yourself having to show up for yourself, I guess, in that sense, Marcel. Firstly, let me apologize. Not having worked with Marcel, not having been in the environments that Marcel is in, I'm sorry that the system has let you down. I'm sure the system has equally rewarded you in other ways. It might have rewarded you financially. It might be very meaningful work that you do, which is also something that we need to highlight. That even when the work is incredibly meaningful and there's connection at that level, there is burnout. There is all of those other sort of challenges that come with that. But anyway, going back to Marcel's challenge. And what I'm hearing is a feeling disempowered. I'm hearing that you feel that no matter what gets done, especially by you, you don't think that anything will change. In fact, you're not sounding like you've got any allies in this challenge or the struggle of yours. So I apologize for that, because we shouldn't be in that world. We shouldn't live in a world where somebody feels that nothing will change, right? However, I'm going to challenge you then to say, Marcel, how are you going to show up for yourself? How are you going to redefine resilience for yourself and for those that might be modeling your behavior? I don't know if that'll be children or younger sort of colleagues that might be looking at you as a role model in the professional context. But how are you going to redefine resilience for you? Not only redefine it in words, but how are you going to redefine it in action? And it's going to challenge a lot of things for you. It's going to challenge reprioritizing some things, and those things might feel uncomfortable, right? Because like you said, you've already normalized working long hours for no pay. There is a reward at the end of that for you. You've been doing it for a reason. There must be something that you're getting. It might be an emotional thing. It might be a sense of more certainty that I'll still have this job, et cetera, et cetera. But you need to kind of go into self and start to look at, why am I perpetuating this behavior, and do I want to change it, right? And then the tough one is find the courage to act and actually make that change. And over time, hopefully, we'll be speaking about a Marcel that showed up for himself, irrespective of whether the system has failed you or not. Because yes, whilst the system, we have to challenge it and we must create better environments and ecosystems that are more supportive, are more empathetic, are more, etc., supportive. When they have failed, we must capacitate ourselves with the ability to survive in those environments. And in this instance, we're defining what that survival looks like. It isn't the resilience of old. It isn't at any cost. It is not going to be that. It must be taking care of self. It must be sustainable, simply put, without going on for too long.
Thank you for that. And hey, Marcel, got a coaching session there, girl. We got your back. Last question from Aisha Saleh, also an entrepreneur, driving big, going to corporate events and really amazing amplification of success, of excellence and success in South Africa in business owners and corporates as well. And she asks here, has resilience become a mask we wear to avoid asking for help?
I would say, firstly, powerful question. It's a mask we had to learn to wear. Not to avoid asking for help, because we didn't feel we could ask for help.
Sure.
We've learned from it. We've been told it's what we should wear, because the alternative is too high.
Sure.
This kind of resilience that we're demonstrating is a coping mechanism. Is a collective coping mechanism that is not sustainable. And what is clearly evident is that we can all feel, and I emphasize that word very intentionally, we can all feel that it's failing.
Yeah.
It's failing us on a structural level.
Yeah. Katlego, impactful and powerful. Thank you for sharing. And Marcel, last comment over here. Let me just check it out quickly. Thanks, Katlego. It's a culture at our workplace. The word that comes up often in this conversation for me is courage. I ask for myself and others, for which I hold some responsibility. Good conversation so far. Marcel, I got this just for you.
That is so cool.
Just for you. Just for you. And I want to also share with everyone that this, the conversation today reminded me of this. I have the power. And yes, we are also acknowledging Shira, because yes, not to vote, but you also have the power. So Katlego, as we wrap,
the only one that you're missing is by your powers combined, I am Captain Pat, because collectively, when we start to, to do it together.
Look at you. I love that. You just revealed our age. You and I have just revealed our age. And yes, it's okay. It's okay. But Katlego, I just want to say thank you. I want to say thank you for that. Thank you for the honesty. Thank you for scene setting this conversation. And as we look at recapping, the mask is not strength. The mask has become a strategy, and the strategy of someone who has learned early on that showing up was less safe than performing as a whole. That's not a character flaw. That's a rational response, but it's a response, like Katlego said, that we have learned, that we have immersed, because the alternative to that may have taken a bit of work, and you might not have had that capacity for that work. So I want to share with you that if you are feeling toxic resilience and experiencing what Marcel was brave enough to, Power Rangers, Marcel, what Marcel was brave enough to share, you're not weak. You just have an opportunity right now that you're now aware of, that you can change the system for yourself and for the people around you. And tonight, not tomorrow, tonight, find 15 minutes, like Katlego says, where you are not contactable, no phone, no screen, and really do that check-in with self. And where do you feel this in your body, and what are you carrying right now that you haven't yet named? That answer doesn't make you weak. It just means you're paying attention. And in paying attention is where the change begins. Then what you do the next day to change that is now the opportunity that is open here with the three steps that Katlego gave us. Katlego Mabusela, you are an amazing soul. You are, for me, courageous, and you show that in your words, in showing up, irrespective of, what you may be feeling and dealing with. And I thank you for that. Your quality of your thinking, your generosity with which you share. I mean, this is exactly the kind of conversation that changes something. To everyone that stayed, thank you. For those who asked questions, thank you. You are honest, man. This is what these conversations are all about.
Thank you for holding space for these conversations. Thank you for holding
Chief,
space.
me.
Yeah,
Anything,
you
brother. Me, I got my coaching qualification, Baba. Me, I'm sorted.
And you know what? Out of this conversation in a different emotional state than when I went into it. And that says something, because sometimes it is in having these conversations that shifts something internally for us. So thank you. Honestly, I got more from this than I gave to it.
You and I both, brother. Folks, until the next time, user engagement chats, reach out to each other, reach out to us, and of course your wellness providers out there as well, and really just have these conversations. Until next time, stay well, stay thriving, elevate your human capacity. Peace out. Bye.